The next plant I'm going to show you is a true verified villain. It will actually kill. It will deceive you and draw you in to your demise. Hold on to your seats, boys and girls. Today we'll be looking at the 5 scariest plants in my collection. Yeah. We're going to be looking at the 5 most terrifying plants in my collection. What is up, guys? My name is Lithius, and welcome to Roots Ready. Today we're going to be clawing through my collection of plants, and I'm going to be showing you 5 plants that I think are some of the most scary looking plants in my collection. The first, and I would say easily the most scariest plant in my collection, is this one over here. This is my Cyrtosperma Johnstonii. And can you tell why it is the most scary plant in my collection? It's not because of the dark, menacingly looking leaves or those red blood-like veins that are just cascading across the top of the leaf, or even that dark maroon color on the bottom. One of the scariest things about this plant is right here. It is the stems. They are spiky and quite dark as well, which is quite interesting enough just to add to the horror that is this plant. It's not really that scary. I actually really love this plant. I really do enjoy growing this plant, and as you can see, there's a new leaf on its way over here. Most of you would have seen this plant before if you have been on my channel, and I have spoken about its care, so I won't go into too much detail with this. But what I will do is talk a little bit about maybe just some of the challenges as well, seeing as we're talking about sort of the darker side of plants. One of the challenges of having this plant is keeping the soil moist and consistently moist. You have to remember that this plant, the Cyrtosperma Johnstonii, is a bog plant. It grows in bogs. I have seen people grow this plant in aquariums, so you can tell that they do require quite high humidity around their roots. Now, what I do to make sure that this plant is never without any water is I actually have it growing in pond. I use pond in this situation as a semi-hydro substrate. So I have, a lot of pond in here and just a little bit of water, just a reservoir. To be fair, actually, correction, I don't actually have a reservoir on this with this plant. I actually fill the water all the way up until I can see it sort of breaching the surface of the pond, and then I leave it. And believe it or not, in less than a week, maybe in about 3 or 4 days, the pond will actually be almost dry. So I have to go in again and just top it all the way up to the top. One of the things I'm looking to do is actually getting a larger pot. I think at the moment, this is probably about a 4-inch pot. I had it in a very small, that 2-inch or 1-inch pot before, and it grew to massive sizes. So this was the largest leaf it grew in that pot. And then I upsized it, and you can see that, it's been exponential growth. Who knows what the size of this leaf is going to be. So one of the things I want to do is repot it. But I'm going to wait till summer, because I have a feeling that once I upsize this plant, it's just going to take off and it's going to take over. And it's just going to add to the horror. Not really. That is the Cyrtosperma Johnstonii. The next plant I'm going to show you is a true verified villain. It will actually kill. It will deceive you and draw you in to your demise if you're a fly or an insect. So this is my Nepenthes Spectabilis. This is the Nepenthes Spectabilis, and it is a carnivorous plant, a pitcher plant to be precise. This I've had in my collection maybe about a year or so, and as I alluded to, it is an actual killer. I actually feed this plant little bugs that I find around the house. If I'm not able to find any insects, then I might put a pellet of slow release fertilizer in the pitchers down here. Now, as you can see, all of my pitchers have dried up. Now, these just need to be cut off at the moment. As you can see, I had really good luck getting some pitchers at the early stages when this plant was still very tiny. But now that the leaves are starting to size up, I'm really struggling to get this plant to picture. Now, I know Nepenthes typically require that humidity, and they require a lot of light to sort of produce those pictures. And I believe I'm giving it all of the things that it needs. So it's sitting in my grow tent right under my grow light, with humidity minimum 75%, so it doesn't drop any lower than that. And in the evenings, it goes up to about 100% at times. So it gets all of that, but for whatever reason, it just won't picture for me. I know this is probably one of the more sort of tricky ones to grow. There are some that are a lot easier to look after. You can grow it in regular ambient humidity in your room. However, I haven't had much luck. So that's one of the challenges with this plant. If you do know, if you have any advice for me on how I can sort of encourage more pictures on this plant, do let me know, because I would be really keen to sort of see the beautiful pictures. I've looked online and I've seen what the pictures are going to look like when they're fully developed, and they look absolutely gorgeous, and I cannot wait to get some of my own. But yeah, this is the second plant, the Nepenthes Spectabilis. The next plant is this Amorphophallus Atroviridis, also known as the Voodoo lily. And I must say, the scariest thing about this plant probably is that name, that common name that it has, Voodoo lily, which is quite cool. And you can kind of see why. It's got really lovely dark leaves, almost velvety, almost, I would say more closer to suede than it is to velvet. But it is a gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous plant. I would say one of the things that's really probably the most scary looking thing about this plant is probably just here along the stem. You can see what looks to be, you know, if you were to take a quick look, you might think the plant is infected with some sort of fungus and it might die. But in fact, this is just the natural look of this stem. This is actually how it looks. It's got really, really gorgeous speckling on here, and it looks a lot like lichen on the stem. And I imagine this is for some sort of camouflage. I have no idea why it would need it, what you need to camouflage against, but who knows. But another thing about this plant, I would say, which is a challenge to look after this plant, is its water requirement. I don't think, in my experience or what I've read, this plant particularly likes to dry out. So again, you have to be really on top of the watering. And also, what I've learned, you can see it's kind of leaning over as well. That stem is really fragile, especially when it's sort of this size. When this plant grows up, the stem is quite thick. It's essentially a trunk, but at this point, it's really fragile. So a couple of times, you know what happened? I was drying some clothes inside the house, and a sock fell on the top of the plant and bent it over, and I didn't notice, and I came back, and yeah, the plant is now permanently leaning to the side. So that's just something else to look out for if you do have this plant. But yes, this is the third plant that I'm going to show you today, the Amorphophallus Atroviridis. This Alocasia black velvet has made it to this list because it is, in fact, the darkest plant that I own in my collection. I do have my eye on the ZZ Raven, which is really, really gorgeous. However, I haven't managed to get my hands on one of those. That would have made it to this list easily if I had it. But for now, we're going to be talking about this plant. Look how dark this leaf is. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. This is something else. It's like, I don't know how to describe it. I think on camera, it definitely looks maybe a little bit darker than it does in real life. However, it's basically a really, really dark green color. But what I really like about this plant is the way the lighter green veins just sort of cuts through the leaf. It looks like it's like electricity. It just sort of cuts through, and I really do like this plant for that. As well as being really, really dark, another reason why this plant has made it to this list is because just the care for it, I really struggle. I really struggle with this plant for whatever reason. I have this growing in a greenhouse, my mini greenhouse, which is on my windowsill, access to plenty of light. However, this plant, it just refuses to get really bushy. It's got loads of corms on the growing out of the pond, as you can see over here. However, they just tend to dry up and die, which is a real shame, because I would really love to have a really bushy plant like of this black velvet. However, it makes it difficult. So that's another reason why it's made it to the scariest plants, because I just fear that one day I'm going to wake up and it's just gonna die. It's just gonna be nothing but a stem, which would be a shame because it is a really pretty plant. But yes, this is the Alocasia black velvet. This cacti over here, I would say, is unanimously the most hated plant in my household at the moment. This plant is right up against my west facing window because that's what gets the most afternoon light, the most intense light, and I have most of my cacti up against this window. I'm not sure exactly which one this is. If I do find it, I will put it up on the screen. However, the reason why this plant has made it into this list is because it is, this thing has pricked so many people in this household. I think my sister still has a thorn in her finger that she claims. She blames me for this mystery thorn in her finger, and it's because of this plant. It is, you brush past it and it just gets stuck in your skin, and it's really, really frustrating. The problem is it has to be up against a window. It's either that or I have like an intense grow light up against this plant right above it. I feel like it just seeks out an arm, a bare arm, to sort of get stuck into. But apart from that, this plant is actually really easy to look after. I think this is one of my first cacti that I've ever owned. I got it as a present from someone who was leaving my workplace, and she sort of just gave it to me, this one and another. And since then it's grown. It was just one head of the cacti, which was this one over here, and it's just since sort of popped all over the place. And interestingly enough, this is the only cactus plant that I have that's flowered for me. And this plant has flowered pretty much every year, and really, really gorgeous white. It's kind of insignificant flowers. They're white with a sort of a yellow middle, but still it's really, really interesting. But the reason, I'll say it again, why this plant has made it to this list is because it's just so spiky. Of all the cacti that I own, this is the one that you want to stay well clear of. Boom, there we have it. Those are the top 5 most scary looking plants in my collection. I'm looking at that cactus. It's actually an actual menace to society. I'll tell you that for free. But yes, let me know in the comment area below what plants you own that you would add to this list as well. I think it would be great to sort of see what people's experiences are with different plants. But that was it for today. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, keep planting.